The sky above Bastion Prime darkened, not from nightfall, but from the arrival of the celestial dominion's war fleet. Thousands of shimmering constructs, shaped like burning halos, and crawling with divine energies, descended through the planet's upper atmosphere. The air itself trembled under the weight of their presence. From the command tower of Fort Ironhold, General Elias Voss surveyed the sky, jaw clenched. For centuries, humanity had held the line against countless alien invaders, but this was something different. These weren't just conquerors or warmongers. The celestial dominion saw themselves as gods, and worse, they believed humanity had no right to exist. A transmission crackled through the fortress's war room. A towering, luminous figure materialized in the holographic display, a being wreathed in golden energy, clad in armor that pulsed like a living star. Two burning eyes regarded the human defenders with what could only be described as contempt. "I am Valor, warlord of the Celestial Dominion," the being's voice rang, echoing unnaturally across every broadcast channel on the planet. "Your existence is an affront to the divine order. You have defied the heavens, tampered with forces beyond your station, and spread like vermin across the void." Voss didn't flinch. He had fought all his life, from the first colonies to the blood-soaked sieges of the Outer Rim. He had faced genocidal warlords, synthetic hive minds, and ancient horrors buried beneath dead moons. And every time, humanity had endured. This was no different. "You talk too much," Voss said, folding his arms. "If you're here to fight, get on with it." Valor's burning eyes flared, amusement flickering beneath his contempt. Arrogant, defiant. How? Human. He extended a hand, and the sky split apart. The first attack came without warning. From the orbiting celestial warships, lances of divine energy shot down like spears from the gods themselves. Cities vanished in an instant, vaporized into nothing but expanding clouds of plasma. The ground quaked, and entire mountain ranges shattered under the impact. A billion souls screamed as the first wave of destruction washed over Bastion Prime. The war had begun. ###, the unyielding response. Inside Fort Ironhold, alarms blared as tactical screens flooded with casualty reports. Voss remained still, his mind calculating through the chaos. Status: catastrophic losses in the Eastern Hemisphere, Admiral Sato reported, voice tight. Multiple cities wiped out. Defensive satellites obliterated on impact. Our fleet is engaging, but they're outgunned. Voss exhaled slowly. He expected this. The Dominion was powerful, perhaps more powerful than anything humanity had faced before, but power alone didn't win wars. Strategy did. Tell the fleet to switch to hit and run. Draw them in. Make them overextend. Voss turned to his chief engineer. Activate the planetary railgun batteries. If those divine bastards think they can just walk in and take this world, let's show them what we've got. Above the fortress, the skies ignited with human defiance. From hidden launch sites, titanic railgun arrays powered up, each one crackling with energy. A second later, they fired. Kinetic rounds the size of skyscrapers tore through the heavens. They moved too fast for any shield to react. The first impact slammed into a Dominion warship, punching through its golden hull like paper. The second round sent another celestial construct spinning out of control, its divine energy sputtering as it lost cohesion. The gods could bleed. Across Bastion Prime, surviving human forces rallied. Pilots and exofighters weaved between the massive enemy vessels, unloading payloads of hyper-dense munitions into weak points. Ground-based anti-air defenses locked onto incoming celestial warriors, filling the sky with hellfire. But it wasn't enough. ### Valor descends. From the burning sky, Valor moved. He didn't teleport, didn't use any machine. He simply willed himself downward, and gravity obeyed. He landed in the heart of the human defenses like a meteor, his very presence warping the air. The shockwaves sent entire buildings crumbling. Tanks were lifted from the ground like toys and thrown aside. The elite Titan walkers, massive human mechs built for planetary warfare, turned their weapons on the war god. Valor raised a single hand. A pulse of golden energy erupted outward, obliterating everything in its path. The Titan walkers crumbled, their pilots reduced to ash before they could even scream. The ground itself melted beneath Valor's feet. General Voss watched the carnage from the war room's display, his fingers tightening around the console. "Deploy the Onyx Guard," he ordered. From deep beneath Fort Ironhold, hidden hangars opened. The Onyx Guard, humanity's deadliest super soldiers, enhanced beyond human limits, emerged, clad in Omega-infused armor. These were soldiers built to fight the impossible. And Valor was about to learn that humanity never surrendered. The battlefield was a ruin of fire and shattered steel. The golden armored god stood amidst the wreckage, his towering form illuminated by the glow of molten rock and burning wreckage. Valor, warlord of the celestial dominion, turned his gaze to the advancing Onyx Guard. Unlike the soldiers who had fallen before, these warriors did not hesitate. They moved with calculated precision, their armor shimmering with experimental Omega shielding, humanity's greatest and most forbidden technology. Valor tilted his head, intrigued. More toys, more defiance. His voice echoed unnaturally, shaking the ground beneath their feet. "I will enjoy breaking you." The Onyx Guard did not respond. They struck. With inhuman speed, the first of them, Lieutenant Juno Riss, vaulted into the air, a plasma blade igniting in her grip. She came down like a comet, aiming directly for Valor's head. The war god raised a hand, intending to catch her midair. A mistake. At the last second, Riz twisted, dodging his grasp and slamming a gravity-charged blade into his side. The impact sent a shockwave rippling outward, forcing Valor back a single step, but it was the first time in recorded history that anything had ever moved him without his consent. The gods could bleed. Valor's eyes flashed with something new. Not anger, not fear, amusement. Interesting. Then he struck back. Valor blurred, moving faster than any human eye could follow. The single sweep of his hand sent 3 Onyx soldiers flying, their bodies twisting unnaturally before slamming into a crumbling tower. One died instantly. Another screamed as his armor collapsed inward, crushing him alive. Riss barely had time to evade his next strike. A golden spear materialized in Valor's grip, carving through the air with impossible speed. She ducked, the weapon slicing through the buildings behind her as if they were paper. The shockwave alone shattered her visor. But the Onyx Guard did not fight alone. From the distance, a barrage of hyper-accelerated rounds rained down. The surviving artillery platforms had locked onto Valor's position, their operators throwing everything they had at the war god. The air ignited. Explosions rippled across the battlefield. Chunks of molten debris shot skyward, turning the entire district into a firestorm. Even Valor, in all his divine arrogance, took a moment to brace against the sheer force of the bombardment. The Onyx Guard wasted no time. Sergeant Cole Varian, the team's demolitions expert, sprinted forward, hurling a sphere of crackling energy at Valor's feet. The Omega disruptor detonated, sending out a pulse that shorted out energy fields in a 100-meter radius. Valor's golden aura flickered, his defenses momentarily weakened. That was all the opening they needed. Riz surged forward again, this time joined by Varian and 2 others. They struck in perfect synchronization. Blades, hyper-dense rounds, and Omega-charged weapons tearing into Valor's form. Each hit pushed him back. For the first time in his immortal existence, Valor knew pain. And then he laughed. The sound was deafening, filled with something deeper than mere amusement. "You mortals amuse me." His golden energy surged outward, pushing the Onyx Guard away like ragdolls. The wounds they had inflicted healed instantly. "I will not grant you death yet. You have earned the right to witness something few ever see." He raised his hand toward the heavens. The sky ignited. From orbit, the celestial dreadnoughts responded to their master's command. Pillars of divine fire rained down upon the battlefield, obliterating entire districts in seconds. It was not mere destruction, it was erasure. Cities vanished. Defenses crumbled. The ground itself was reshaped. Fort Ironhold shook under the assault. Inside the war room, General Elias Voss gritted his teeth. He had expected devastation, but not like this. The Dominion wasn't merely trying to win. They were rewriting reality itself. A tactical officer turned to him, face pale. "Sir, the Eastern Hemisphere is gone." Voss inhaled slowly. He could mourn later, if there was a later. "Get me Admiral Sato." The comms flickered, and the Admiral's grim face appeared. "We're barely holding the orbital lines, General. This is worse than we thought." Voss nodded. "Then it's time we stop thinking conventionally." A pause. Then realization dawned in Sato's eyes. "You don't mean we're activating Project Omega?" Silence. Then Sato gave a tight nod. "Understood." The connection cut. Voss turned to his officers. "Evacuate what remains of the Onyx Guard, and prepare the weapon." As the sky burned, and the gods laughed, humanity made its choice. They would not go quietly. They would make the gods bleed, and they would win. The halls of Fort Ironhold trembled as another orbital strike shook Bastion Prime. The sky was a boiling maelstrom of fire, the ground scared beyond recognition. Yet deep within the fortress, behind layers of reinforced steel and energy shielding, humanity's last, best hope was being prepared. General Elias Voss stood before the war room's primary console, watching live feeds from the battlefield. The Onyx Guard had failed to kill Valor, but they had done the impossible. They had wounded him. That meant he could be hurt. That meant he could be killed. "Status on Project Omega?" Voss asked, his voice steady despite the carnage outside. Dr. Lynn Calder, lead scientist on the Omega Initiative, turned from her workstation. Her face was drawn, but her eyes burned with purpose. "The weapon is operational, but it's not stable. If we deploy it recklessly, we could cause a localized singularity, or worse, a cascade reaction that wipes out half the planet." Voss exhaled sharply. "We don't have the luxury of caution. We either kill Valor or humanity dies." Calder hesitated, then nodded. "There is a way," she said carefully. "Valor isn't just powerful. He's connected to something beyond our understanding. Every energy signature we've recorded suggests he draws power from an external source." Voss frowned. "A power source, like a celestial artifact?" Calder shook her head. "No, it's bigger than that. Every time he recovers from an injury, every time his power spikes, there's a matching energy fluctuation in the Dominion fleet. It's as if they're feeding him power in real time." Voss narrowed his eyes. "You're saying the fleet itself is his power source?" "Not just the fleet, something within it, something vast." Calder pulled up a 3D model of the Dominion's command ship, an impossibly large construct hovering in high orbit. "This," she said, pointing at the core of the ship, "is putting out energy readings that defy physics. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Voss leaned forward. "You think if we destroy this, whatever it is, Valor becomes vulnerable?" Calder nodded. "At the very least, it will weaken him. If we sever his connection to that energy source, he'll have to rely on his own reserves. And if that happens, the Omega weapon might actually finish him." A grim smile spread across Voss's face. "Then we take the fight to the gods. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. The mission begins." Within the hour, the operation was set into motion. A single stealth ship, the Sable Ghost, slipped through the chaos of the ongoing battle, weaving through debris and celestial warships undetected. Aboard the vessel, a team of elite operatives prepared for what would likely be their final mission. Lieutenant Juno Riss, bruised but unbroken from her fight with Valor, checked her gear one last time. Across from her, Sergeant Cole Varian double-checked the charges for their Omega payload. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Dominion command ship, locate the power source, and destroy it. Simple didn't mean easy. "This is insane," Varian muttered as he secured his weapons. "We're boarding a goddamn divine warship." Rice smirked. Wouldn't be the first time humanity did something impossible. The Sable Ghost reached its insertion point, navigating through the gaps in the Dominion's defenses. The ship's advanced cloaking system held. Barely. Any slip, and they would be obliterated before they even reached the surface. 5 seconds to breach, the pilot announced. "Hold on." With a sudden jolt, the ship latched onto the hull of the Dominion command vessel. The boarding drill engaged, boring a hole into the impossibly smooth golden plating of the ship. Seconds later, the hatch opened, and the strike team moved in. Inside, the air was unnaturally still. The architecture was unlike anything human minds could fully comprehend, curved structures that seemed to shift subtly when not directly observed. Strange glyphs pulsed with an eerie golden light. "This place feels wrong," Varian muttered, scanning the halls with his weapon raised. "Focus," Rice said. "Find the power source." They moved quickly, navigating through corridors that bent in ways that defied logic. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant hum vibrating with something deeper than sound. Then they found it. ####, the heart of a god. The core chamber was vast, an endless void illuminated by a single pulsing construct at its center. It was neither machine nor organic, but something in between. It beat like a heart, radiating golden energy in steady waves. Rise activated her scanner. The readings were incomprehensible, but one thing was clear. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what's feeding him." Varian moved forward, planting the Omega charges around the chamber, setting the timer. 2 minutes until detonation. Then the air change. A pressure, a presence. A deep voice, calm and patient, filled the chamber. "You should not be here." A figure materialized above them, floating effortlessly in the air. It was not Valor, but something worse. A being wrapped in flowing light, its face hidden behind an ornate mask. It radiated power beyond comprehension. "You seek to sever the divine," the being said, "but you are too late." The golden energy from the core surged. Alarms blared. Something was happening, something beyond their control. Riss didn't hesitate. "Blow it. Now." Varian hit the detonator. The Omega charges erupted. The chamber was consumed in an explosion of black light, and the last thing Rice saw before the world went white was the masked being, watching them not with anger, but with something that almost looked like pity. The explosion should have been instant. The Omega charges should have reduced the core chamber to nothing but ruin. But something went wrong. As the detonator was triggered, the golden energy from the core surged outward, colliding with the explosion in a paradox of forces. Time itself seemed to shatter. One moment, Rice and her team were standing. The next, they were caught in an impossible storm of light and shadow. Rice felt her body being pulled in every direction at once. She screamed, but no sound escaped. And then, nothing. A deafening silence replaced the chaos. Rice gasped for breath, falling to her knees. The world around her was wrong. She was still in the chamber, but it was no longer burning. The walls had shifted, stretching into infinite horizons. The core itself was gone, but a presence remained. She turned, heart pounding. Varian was there, barely conscious, his armor cracked from the force of the blast. The rest of the team was gone, either vaporized or, somehow, removed from reality. And before them, standing amidst the floating remnants of the chamber, was the masked being, unharmed. "You do not understand what you have done," the entity said, its voice calm, but filled with something vast. Rice forced herself to stand, ignoring the agony in her limbs. She raised her weapon, her instincts screaming that nothing about this was right. "Then explain it to me," she spat. The being tilted its head, as if considering. Then, with an almost human sigh, It raised a hand. A vision flooded Rai's mind. Images, memories, things beyond her comprehension. She saw the origins of the Dominion, not as conquerors, but as wardens, not as gods, but as prisoners. The Dominion's power did not belong to them. It belonged to something greater, something they had barely contained. The energy they wielded, the power Valor drew from, was a cage, a seal on something older than the universe itself. And she had just destroyed a piece of it. The vision ended, and Rhys staggered back, gasping. "No," she whispered. "Yes," the masked being said. "You believed you fought against gods." It paused. "You have no idea what you were truly fighting." Varian groaned, pushing himself up. "What the hell?" Rhys clenched her fists. If the Dominion was holding something back, why didn't they just tell us? The masked being did not answer. Instead, it turned its gaze toward the battlefield outside. Because they knew you would not believe them. Valor unchained. Far above Bastion Prime, the celestial warships shuddered. The Dominion fleet, once an unbreakable force, flickered. The moment the core was destroyed, something shifted in the balance of power. And Valor felt it. The warlord stood atop the ruined remains of the Onyx Guard's last position, his golden armor smeared with the blood of humanity's greatest warriors. He had been about to deliver the killing blow when he felt the change, like a chain being broken. For the first time in his existence, the power he had drawn from the Dominion wavered. And then it surged. The warlord stumbled, his eyes burning brighter than ever before. But it was not controlled. His form crackled with unstable energy, divine power twisting violently around him. His lips curled into something between rage and exhilaration. "They have severed the tether," Valor murmured, his voice barely more than a growl. "Fools." He turned his gaze toward the heavens. Even from the surface, he could see the Dominion ships beginning to falter, their divine engines sputtering. Without the core's stabilizing influence, their very existence was now at risk. But Valor was free. The warlord flexed his fingers, and the energy around him darkened, warping into something deeper, more primal. He clenched his fists. The Dominion had always tempered his strength, held him back. Now, there was nothing left to stop him. He would end this world. The final stand. Within Fort Ironhold, General Voss watched the battlefield unfold in grim silence. His tactical screens flickered with impossible energy readings. The Dominion forces were faltering, but Valor was becoming something else. Dr. Calder's voice was shaking as she spoke. "Sir, the Omega weapon might not be enough anymore." Voss exhaled, forcing himself to think. No, there had to be a way. "Get me Admiral Sado," he ordered. The comms crackled to life, the Admiral's face appearing on screen, his expression as grim as ever. "General, I assume you're seeing this." Voss nodded. "We severed the Dominion's power source, but now Valor is." He glanced at the rising energy readings. Ascending. Sado didn't hesitate. "Then we hit him with everything we've got. We still have nuclear payloads, the Omega weapon, and the last of our fleet." Voss clenched his jaw. "It won't be enough." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then, Sado exhaled sharply. "There might be one option left." Voss looked at him sharply. "No, you can't mean." "The Black Gate." Silence fell over the war room. The words felt heavy, like a death sentence. The Black Gate wasn't a weapon. It was a forbidden experiment, a tear in space-time that led to something unknown. It had been buried for a reason. But if Valor was truly unkillable now, Voss closed his eyes for a moment. Then he made the call. "Prep the gate." As the sky burned and the war reached its final act, humanity's last gambit was set into motion. They would not go quietly. They would drag the gods into the abyss with them. The storm of war reached its peak. Across Bastion Prime, humanity's defenses crumbled. The sky was split by streaks of fire as the last of the Dominion warships fell in blazing wreckage. Yet, in the heart of the devastation, Valor stood, his form wreathed in something deeper than mere divine power. He had ascended. The Omega disruption had freed him from the shackles of the Dominion's controlled energy, but it had not weakened him. It had unchained him. The warlord's golden armor had darkened, cracks of unstable void light running through it like molten veins. His eyes burned with something ancient and uncontrollable. "This is your doing," he whispered, voice carrying across the battlefield. "You have freed me, and so I will grant you a warrior's end." He raised his hand. A single gesture. The earth cracked open. Cities, defenses, entire strongholds were obliterated in an instant, consumed by the raw force of his will. The very planet trembled beneath him. And yet, in the depths of Fort Ironhold, humanity's final gambit was unfolding. Activating the Black Gate, General Voss stood before the control terminal, staring at the last weapon they had left. The Black Gate, a relic of forgotten science, buried beneath the deepest levels of Bastion Prime. Dr. Calder's hands were shaking as she activated the final sequence. "This was never meant to be used," she whispered. "We don't even know what's on the other side." Voss exhaled. "I know, but I also know what's waiting for us if we don't." The war room trembled as another shockwave from Valor's onslaught shook the facility. The gate hummed, its massive circular structure flickering to life. At first, it was a void, nothing but emptiness. But then, something looked back. Calder recoiled. "It's aware." Voss clenched his fists. "I don't care. We're out of time." He turned to the comms officer. "Get me Riz." The channel flickered, and Lieutenant Juno Rice's face appeared, bruised, bloodied, but alive. Behind her, the warp remains of the Dominion's command vessel crackled with unstable energy. "We found the power source," Rice reported, voice tight. "It wasn't what we thought. We've made things worse." "I know," Voss said grimly, "but we have one last option." He sent her the coordinates. Rice's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "Get Valor there," Voss ordered. "Do whatever it takes." For a moment, Rice hesitated. Then she nodded. "Luring a god." The sable ghost burned through the atmosphere, dodging debris and firestorms as it descended toward the battlefield. Rice stood in the open hatch, gripping onto the rails, her breath steady despite the chaos around her. Below, Valor turned his gaze skyward, sensing something. Rice smirked. "Good. Come get me, you bastard." "Varian," she called over the comms. "You still got that Omega disruptor?" "Last one," Varian replied. "But if this doesn't work." "It'll work." She leaped from the ship. Plummeting toward the battlefield, she twisted midair, firing her grappling anchor toward a ruined structure. It caught, yanking her violently to the side just as Valor's hand swept through the space she had just occupied. She landed hard, rolling to her feet. Valor turned to face her, his form radiating unstable energy. "You are persistent," he mused. Riz grinned, blood trickling from her lip. "And you're predictable." Valor lunged. Riz moved. She led him through the ruins, dodging collapsing structures and leaping across burning wreckage. Every attack from Valor reshaped the battlefield, craters forming where his strikes landed. But he was following her. That was all that mattered. Varian's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Almost there. Get him to the gate." Rice sprinted toward the designated coordinates. Behind her, Valor raised his hand, summoning a spear of pure entropy. "I grow tired of this game," he growled. He hurled the spear. Rice dove. Too late. The weapon struck her midair. Pain. Unimaginable, searing pain. The force of the impact sent her crashing through a ruined wall. She hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. Her vision blurred. Valor approached, his shadow falling over her. "This is the end, mortal." Rice coughed, blood staining her teeth. "Not yet." She triggered the Omega disruptor. A pulse of void energy exploded outward, sending Valor staggering. His divine form flickered, destabilized for just a moment. But a moment was enough. Above, the sky split open. The black gate roared to life. Into the unknown. From the depths of the gate, something reached out. Not a weapon, not a force of nature. Something ancient, something hungry. The ground beneath Valor cracked, shifting toward the swirling vortex. The warlord struggled, his godlike power raging against the pull. "What have you done?" Valor bellowed, his voice shaking the heavens. Rise, barely conscious, looked up at him and smiled weakly. "I don't know." The gate pulsed. Tendrils of abyssal energy wrapped around Valor, pulling him toward the void. He resisted, his power clashing against the unknown force. But he was not stronger than what lay beyond. The warlord roared, clawing at reality itself as he was dragged into the abyss. His form twisted, his golden light flickering and breaking apart. And then, he was gone. The gate slammed shut. The battlefield fell silent. Riz lay on the ground, staring at the empty sky. It was over. Or at least, that's what she thought. Because deep beneath the ruined earth, something else had awakened. And it was watching. The battlefield was still. For the first time since the war began, there were no explosions, no screams, no distant hum of Dominion warships. Just silence. The sky above Bastion Prime remained fractured, streaked with the remnants of the celestial conflict. But the greatest threat, the warlord Valor, was gone. Riz lay on her back, staring at the spot where the black gate had sealed shut. Her entire body ached, her vision blurred. She barely registered the approach of Varian, his battered armor flickering with the last vestiges of its failing power core. "You alive?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Riz let out a weak chuckle. Debatable. Varian sighed, glancing at the closed gate. "I can't believe that worked." "Yeah," Riz muttered, her fingers curling into the dirt. "Me neither." Across the ruined landscape, the remaining Dominion forces had ceased their attacks. Their once unbreakable formations were in chaos, their divine energy sources crippled. Many of them stood in stunned silence, as if realizing, for the first time, that their gods were not invincible. Some began retreating into the void, abandoning their campaign entirely. And yet, something still felt wrong. The price of victory. At Fort Ironhold, General Voss and Dr. Calder watched the readings from the Black Gate's containment field. It was still holding, but the data was strange. "This isn't right," Calder whispered, rapidly analyzing the energy output. The gate didn't just close. It adapted. It's drawing power from something. Voss frowned. "You mean from Valor?" Calder hesitated, then shook her head. "No, something else. Something older." A deep, distant rumble echoed through the underground facility. It didn't come from an explosion or an orbital strike. It came from beneath them. Voss turned sharply. "Tell me that's just residual seismic activity." Calder's expression was pale. "It's not." The gate had not just sealed Valor away. It had opened something else. Awakening in the dark. Far beneath the battlefield, where the remains of the Dominion's core reactor still crackled with dying energy, something shifted. For millennia, it had slept. Not imprisoned, not bound, merely forgotten. The Dominion had built their power atop its resting place, leeching off the dimensional barriers it had once formed. The war, the disruption, the collapse of the core, everything had weakened its prison. And now, with Valor's essence added to the mix, the balance had been shattered. A low vibration pulsed through the ruins, a whisper, not in sound, but in thought. It was awake. And it was hungry. An impossible choice. Rice and Varian reached the evacuation zone near Fort Ironhold just as the first tremors began. Soldiers were still gathering the wounded, their exhausted faces barely registering the shaking ground at first. But then came the sound. A deep, resonant howl that should not have existed in this reality. Every screen, every communication device, every electronic system shut down for a full 5 seconds. Then they all flickered back to life, showing the same symbol, a spiral. Rice felt ice crawl down her spine. "Voss," she called into her comm. "Tell me you're seeing this." Voss' voice came back, grim and certain. "We see it." Calder's voice cut in, frantic. "Riz, we made a mistake. The gate didn't just take Valor. It took his energy and fed it into something else." Rice exchanged a glance with Varian. "How bad?" Calder hesitated. "Apocalyptic." The tremors grew stronger. The earth split open in the distance, and from the newly formed chasms, something began to rise. Voss' voice came over the comms once more. "We won the battle," he said, "but the real war is just beginning." And then, from the depths of the planet, the entity emerged. The ground split apart, jagged ruptures tearing through the war-torn surface of Bastion Prime. What rose from the depths was not a Dominion war machine, nor a remnant of their celestial empire. It was something older, something that had been buried for eons beneath the foundation of their so-called gods. It was never meant to wake up. A massive, shifting form began to take shape, its body not made of flesh or metal, but something between. It shimmered, twisting in and out of visibility, like it did not fully belong to this universe. The spiral symbol, now burned into every active screen, every heads-up display, even the minds of those present, began to turn. And then it spoke, not with words, not with sound, but with an overwhelming presence, a psychic wave that drowned thought itself. "You have broken this CY tale." Wright screamed as her head exploded with pain. Around her, soldiers collapsed, clutching their skulls. Some began convulsing, while others simply stopped moving altogether, their bodies still but their eyes wide with horror. Varian gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay conscious. "Rise, move." She snapped out of the pain just in time to see a tendril of shifting energy lash toward them. Instinct took over. She dove, rolling to avoid it as the ground melted where it struck. "What the hell is that thing?" she gasped, pulling Varian up. Through the chaos, Calder's frantic voice came over the comms. "It's not Dominion. It's something they feared, something even they couldn't control. It was sealed beneath their empire, and we just set it free." Riz clenched her fists. "Give me something useful, Calder. How do we kill it?" Calder hesitated, and that single pause told Rice everything she needed to know. "You can't," Calder admitted. "The Dominion didn't defeat it. They just trapped it. It's a higher dimensional entity. What we're seeing is just a fraction of it bleeding into reality." Riz cursed under her breath. They had fought a war against so-called gods, only to learn that even the gods had things they feared. And now, they were alone against it. The last gambit. In Fort Ironhold's command center, Voss stared at the readings in grim silence. Every satellite, every long-range scanner, every surviving AI system was malfunctioning. No, not malfunctioning. Being overwritten. The entity wasn't just alive. It was infesting their reality. Sato's voice came in over emergency channels. "General, our orbital platforms are being corrupted. It's spreading through the data itself." Voss' expression hardened. "If we can't fight it, we erase it." He turned to Calder. "What happens if we overload the Black Gate?" Calder's eyes widened. "You mean detonate it?" "We barely understand how it works," she protested. "If we push it past its threshold, it cold." "I don't care," Voss interrupted. "Can it pull this thing back in?" Calder swallowed hard. "Maybe, but it would take everything we have left. Every last nuclear charge, every remaining Omega warhead. We have to detonate them inside the gate and force it to collapse on itself." Voss gave a sharp nod. "Then that's what we do. Buying time with blood." On the battlefield, the entity was spreading. The ground itself was warping, bending toward it as if reality was being rewritten around its form. Massive tendrils lashed outward, dragging entire warships from the sky and consuming them. Riss barely had time to react before a tendril slammed down between her and Varian. He stumbled back, gripping his plasma rifle. "This is suicide," he muttered. Rice smirked, wiping blood from her lip. Yeah, well, we're getting good at that. Her comm crackled. Voss' voice came through. Lieutenant, we have a plan. You're not gonna like it. Rice exhaled. Lay it on me. Voss didn't hesitate. We're overloading the Black Gate. It's the only way to pull this thing back. Rice glanced at the writhing nightmare before them. How long? 5 minutes, Voss said. But we need someone to keep it here until detonation. Rice stared at the entity as its spiraling form loomed ever larger. Understood. She turned to Varian. Think we can piss off a god? Varian gave her a lopsided grin. I thought you'd never ask. The final stand begins. They ran toward the impossible. Rice fired first, unleashing a volley of high-explosive rounds directly into what she hoped was the entity's core. The projectiles vanished before they even made contact, erased from existence. Varian was already moving, activating the last Omega disruptor. The pulse fired straight into the entity's form, sending ripples of unstable energy across its surface. The creature twitched. Then it turned its attention to them. The psychic pressure intensified, slamming into Rise with enough force to drop her to her knees. Her vision blurred, her mind filling with visions of things that should not be known. Entire civilizations consumed. Stars extinguished. The end of everything. Varian grabbed her shoulder. Stay with me, Riz. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself back up. The entity moved, its massive form surging toward them. Riz took a deep breath. They just needed to last 5 minutes. Then the sky turned white. The sky erupted in a blinding cascade of energy. The Black Gate's containment field buckled, sending fractures of raw dimensional force surging across Bastion Prime. Every remaining Dominion warship, every surviving defense system, even the planet itself groaned under the force of the impending detonation. And yet, the entity did not falter. The creature loomed larger, its spiral form twisting through space in ways that defied understanding. It was no longer a shadow lingering at the edge of reality. It was here. Entire portions of the battlefield were being unwritten, the laws of physics themselves breaking as it extended its reach. Res staggered to her feet, gripping her rifle despite knowing it was useless. Varian was beside her, his armor cracked, his breathing ragged. The entity's presence pressed down on them like a collapsing star. We're out of time, Varian muttered. Voss' voice crackled through the comms. Gates at critical levels. We can't hold the containment much longer. Riz clenched her jaw. Then we make sure it stays here. The last sacrifice. The plan was reckless. Stupid, even. But at this point, there was no other option. They had to bait the entity fully into the detonation zone. Rise activated her thrusters, launching herself toward the spiraling horror. Varian followed, his Omega disruptor primed for one last blast. The entity reacted, its shifting form rippling toward them. The psychic pressure became unbearable. Visions of infinite oblivion slammed into Rise's mind. She saw civilizations that had never existed, stars collapsing in reverse, timelines shattering and reforming in endless loops. And yet, through the chaos, she fought back. You want us? She spat, blood dripping from her nose. Then come and get us, you cosmic freak. She and Varian fired their last rounds directly into the abyss. For the first time, the entity acknowledged them as a threat. It lunged right into the center of the detonation zone. Voss gave the final command. Blow it. Detonation. The Black Gate collapsed inward. The sky ripped apart, a singularity forming at the heart of the battlefield. Every Omega warhead, every surviving power source, every unstable fragment of Dominion energy imploded into a single moment of destruction. A shockwave of reality distortion spread outward, dragging the entity with it. The spiral twisted, its form writhing as it was pulled back into the abyss. It resisted. Tendrils of broken reality lashed outward, striking ships, fortresses, entire mountain ranges. But the gate's collapse was absolute. There was no stopping it. The entity gave one final, inhuman scream, not of pain, but of rage. And then it was gone. The cost of victory. Silence. The battlefield was empty. The sky, once fractured, now held nothing but the distant stars. The black gate was gone, erased along with everything that had touched it. Rise and Varian lay among the ruins, barely alive. Their armor was shattered, their weapons destroyed, their bodies broken. But they were still here. Voss' voice came through, weak but relieved. We did it. Rise coughed, laughing through the pain. Damn right we did. Across Bastion Prime, the remaining Dominion forces have vanished. Their so-called gods have been exposed as false idols, their celestial empire reduced to ruins. Humanity had done the impossible. They had won. Epilogue. What comes next? Days passed, then weeks. The war was over. The cost had been unimaginable, but humanity had survived. They had proven that no god, no empire, no ancient horror could dictate their fate. But some questions remained. What did we really lock away? Calder asked, staring at the remnants of their last readings. No one had an answer. Rise, recovering in the medical bay, stared out at the stars. She knew something was still out there. The entity had been sealed away, but for how long? Varian sat beside her, his arm in a sling. You think it's really gone? Rice exhaled. I think it's waiting. The war was won, but the fight for the future had just begun.